Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with you on the 6th of May. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information, and one of the ways that you can do that effectively is by watching Alaska Weather. Thank you for joining us tonight. You can also get more information on the phone. The Alaska Weather Information line is at 1-800-472-0391. Find us online at weather.gov/Alaska, where you'll find the images that we use to make this show online as soon as the show is over, and of course into the early morning hours for a lot of that material. We'll gradually replace that with more updated information and send you to those links as we go through the morning hours before we replace them again in the afternoon. And if you can't find what you're looking for, whether it's from this show, from the Alaska Aviation Weather Unit, the Alaska Pacific River Forecast Center, and information about breakup, or just your general weather forecast, or a look at the radar and satellite pictures, let me know. I'm happy to serve you any way I possibly can. Here's a look at the warning and watch information for Alaska. Right now we're focused mainly on fire weather concerns. Red flag warnings are posted for tonight through the next couple days. For the eastern Alaska Range and the Dehne and Tanana Flats region, we're primarily concerned with drying conditions there as winds are pouring over some of the higher terrain in the next several days or so. And with those southerly winds increasing, we expect drier conditions to develop, which could present a possibility for increased fire weather danger, thus the red flag warning, which is an alert to wildland fire managers that conditions are changing in a way that may not be helpful to them. So your job is to be careful with fire. Make sure that you are extinguishing campfires. Make sure that you're not running over dry grass with catalytic converters that are in some of your ATVs and off-road vehicles there. And be mindful that cigarette butts thrown out of your window could easily start fires in this type of situation. So in this case, the eastern Alaska Range and the Dehne, Tanana Flats region there, south of Fairbanks and around the Delta Junction cutoff and southward into the higher terrain, is becoming one of those areas where fire danger is increasing again for the next couple of days. And we'll continue to share these with you as we go through the rest of the summer. Here's a look at the breakup map for your Monday, May 6th, and you'll notice a lot more blue on the chart there for the upper Yukon Valley, as well as areas to the south and west. Most of south central rivers now are listed as completely open, if not mostly open, and you'll see that through the Susitna Valley as well as areas in the Copper River Valley. We're still seeing mushy conditions along the Yukon Valley, so the message from the Alaska Pacific River Forecast Center is stay off the ice. It is not safe for travel at this point. Even though there may be ice in the channel close to you, chances are that it is becoming very soft and very dangerous, and we would not like to hear any more news from your community about dangerous river conditions because people have gone out on the ice. So do your part, stay safe, and stay off the ice for the rest of the season. Here's a look at fire danger now as we go into the rest of today. Looks like the general fire weather concerns there on top of the red flag warnings will be areas across the eastern Alaska Range, and we're watching a developing area of drying conditions around the Matanuska Valley just north of Anchorage. We do have a couple smaller fires going in those areas. So no question about it, we are moving into that higher fire danger part of the year there before green up and before we really get into a wetter part of the year toward the end of the summer especially. So again, be careful with fire. As we take a look at the satellite picture, you'll notice a broad flow is coming in from the south. We have several waves of low pressure that are caught up in this flow, and behind that, more of a northerly flow working through the Bering Sea. That's bringing in cold enough air for rain and snow conditions there. Not a whole lot of major weather issues at this point, but we are getting a steadier rainfall opportunity out of this for southeast, pretty typical conditions there, as well as areas of cloud cover working their way up through the central and eastern parts of the interior along the Alcan border. Now up north, if you look carefully, you can see that milky white color here across the north slope. That is low clouds and fog. And with that northerly flow moving in and stopping at the Brooks Range summits, we're keeping a wealth of cold air in place there. We'll check on those temperatures in just a little bit. In the meantime, you can see one wave of low pressure kind of lurking here around the Yukon and Kuskokwim Delta, keeping conditions a little low at times, and another wave that's going to replace this. This is going to become the dominant surface low pressure system as that moves northward. It's going to drag another round of wet air into parts of southeast and into south central as we go into the next couple days. Here's a look at the surface chart. Low pressure sitting south and west of Yakutat at 1,011 millibars. Another wave up here across the upper Yukon. That's grabbed onto some moisture and pushing that against the Brooks Range where we see a little bit of light snow at this point. No watches or warnings for any type of precipitation right now. A frontal boundary working across southwest. We'll keep south and southwesterly winds working through the region. That'll keep things unsettled, to say the least. Wind's not terribly bad with this, but enough that we'll see a little bit more turbulence developing in the next couple days. You'll see that in the aviation chart coming up here in just a few minutes. And once again, the dominant low pressure pattern that is developing now is that 986 millibar low south of Sandpoint and Kodiak. That's going to bring up another surge of southerly winds and reinforce the opportunity for wetter weather as we get into tonight and tomorrow. As that warm front works its way toward the North Gulf Coast, watch for rain to spread out again across southeast. Snow showers for some of the higher terrain and into Prince William Sound. It looks like most of areas around Cordova, Valdez, into Whittier, and also as far west as Seward are looking at generally rainfall, though we're not expecting to see any of that snow coming down to sea level. Watch for areas of wind coming off the mountains. Generally speaking, it looks like a light rainfall expected for south and west with periods of rain and snow showers for Norton Sound all the way out toward Nunivak Island. And by the time you get to St. Paul and St. George, it'll probably be a rain-snow mix, but watch for that snow boundary to be very close where you are. Northerly winds will continue across the chain. That means generally cool weather will continue for the central and western Aleutians. And high pressure up across the Arctic working in tandem with low pressure across the northern Yukon and the Northwest Territories, bringing in that north and easterly flow for the Beaufort Seacoast. That's going to keep conditions low at least through tonight and into Tuesday. Watch for that again in the aviation forecast with your flying weather charts in a moment. Low pressure will sit across the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, about 987 millibars for your Tuesday. The broad southerly flow working its way into the Gulf is going to keep things low and soggy for most locations there. The Cook Inlet region will probably go up and down throughout the day with passing areas of showers, but it looks like the widespread rainfall will be out to the west and to the east of Cook Inlet, so to speak. Colder air is working its way out of the Yukon Valley in the upper regions, and slowly and surely that'll kind of merge with this low pressure wave that we see working its way into the interior. But with those stronger southerly winds again, we're watching for fire weather danger here simply because that moisture won't have made it into regions north of the Alaska Range. And across the west, northerly winds working its way through the central and western Bering. You can barely see the glimpse or a tease of high pressure working its way into the western chain. That's about 1,024 millibars. And as we get into Wednesday, that shoots northward and helps to drive that northerly wind across the Bering Sea. It's not going to be terribly strong, but you might get a little bit more of a breeze than anywhere else around the Bering Strait communities. And that's also going to help to really solidify some of that colder air working its way into north and western Alaska. So areas of light snow should be expected there and around Norton Sound. Probably see some rain and snow there for coastal communities, including Nome, Unalakleet, and down toward Amonuk. Watch for areas of light snow across the Brooks Range and up toward the Chukchi Coast. A better chance of fog there for Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse and east toward Kaktovik. South down the Alcan border we go, and you'll see periods of showers there, and really that'll be the story for most of interior and south and western Alaska. It's kind of generally unsettled, cloudy, murky, and showery weather with a better chance for rainfall, a little bit more of a steadier fashion, across central and northern parts of southeast into Yakutat and just about to Prince William Sound as the boundary lingers here across the eastern Gulf. Let's take a look at your temperatures, and it is going to be cool up north, looking for single digits and teens from the Brooks Range summits to Anaktuvik Pass and east toward Arctic Village. South of that, though, substantially warmer, and temps will hover at or just above the freezing point for areas from Ambler to Bettles out toward Fairbanks, and south of that it gets even warmer, upper 30s to lower 40s into Bristol Bay, the eastern chain, Prince William Sound, and Kodiak Island looking at temps closer to 40 degrees and mid to upper 40s for parts of southeast, with Anchorage looking at a low near 40 degrees overnight. High temperatures tomorrow, back closer to 50 degrees around Prince William Sound, and for most of southeast, you might get a little bit cooler around Craig and Klawock, still stuck in the 40s there if it's raining. Temps in the interior are shooting up. Why? Well, warmer air is moving in, that's one part, but the other part is air is rushing down off the Alaska Range, and that tends to warm things up as that air is compressed, the molecules bump together. Frictional or compressional warming also will boost the temperature as long as those winds are blowing. That also dries things out, and that's part of the fire weather concern, but you'll notice those temperatures climbing and that weather effect happening when you see readings back in the lower to mid 60s on your backyard thermometer. 53 degrees around Fort Yukon tomorrow, and you can see just south of the Brooks Range that heat builds into the Kotzebue Sound region. Nome 42, Kotzebue about the same. Anywhere from Bethel south and west, you could see temps easily in the lower to mid 50s. McGrath may be a little cooler in the 40s, and 40s, maybe even 30s out to the west with that northerly wind shooting down the western chain. Look for 30s and 40s for most of the interior, southwest, south central. all the way out towards southeast, where temps could be a little bit milder than that. Kodiak about 40. The north slope conditions still in the teens and single digits. And high temperatures for your Wednesday, oh, they look like they'll stay in the 50s and 60s for the interior. 63 in Eagle, 64 Northway, 40s and 50s for Cook Inlet, about 50 degrees for Bethel and most of our southwest villages, 39 in Nome, and 44 in Kotzebue for Wednesday afternoon.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
And on to aviation weather now. IFR conditions are going to linger across the North Slope all the way down through the Bering Strait, St. Lawrence Island down to St. Matthew, and across southwest into northern parts of the Pacific and the Alaska Peninsula, around Bristol Bay especially. Now, Prince William Sound eastward towards southeast, you're going to see hit and miss. IFR around the coast for sure, but the inside passage looks like we're going to see a little more MVFR throughout your Tuesday morning, and marginal conditions will be lingering around the Alaska Range and into the Wrangell, St. Elias, and Copper River Valley regions. As we get into Tuesday afternoon, you'll see the IFR pretty much staying stuck in all the same places there. You may see some improvement around the western Alaska Range. MVFR conditions still hit and miss across the Alaska Range and eastward toward the Alcan border. But the interior, the Brooks Range, south-facing slopes, all the way out to the Kobuk, Noatak Valleys, and Kotzebue Sound region, and really a large chunk of the northern Seward Peninsula should be okay. Most of the Bering, St. Paul, St. George, still lingering under marginal weather as we go through the day. Wednesday morning, not a lot of change out west. IFR is still lurking around the Yukon and Kuskokwim deltas, generally north of Bethel and then into the southwest Capes. Bristol Bay itself, especially the Bering Sea coast of the Alaska Peninsula, should be okay. Port Heiden, probably okay, but just to your south and east, you're going to run into more marginal conditions. IFR lingers around Portage Pass, the Copper River Valley, and east into southeast, but the inside passage and then south of Sitka, generally marginal weather there. Higher terrain looking at IFR, and the North Slope still stuck under IFR. That's not going to change for Wednesday afternoon. And as we get into more of the prime heating of the season here, isolated convection or thunderstorm activity may start to develop here across the Yukon and the Alcan border into the upper Yukon Valley and around Eagle. We'll be watching for that in the 40-mile country as well. Now out across the west, Bering Strait community, St. Lawrence Island to the Yukon Delta, also looking at IFR to return. And the IFR regions out across the eastern Gulf shrinking with improving weather around the inside passage from Sitka southward toward Craig and Klawock and all the way up toward Petersburg, maybe as far north as Juneau as we get into your Wednesday. Here's your pass conditions for Tuesday now. Anaktuvuk and Adigan Pass, we expect to see some improving weather toward VFR conditions by the afternoon. That's a little bit on the hopeful side, but it does look like we're going to start out with marginal weather at very least. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass expecting to lean over toward marginal weather as the day goes on. Lake Clark may see a little more improvement than Merrill Pass as the day goes. So again, look toward Lake Clark perhaps for better weather if you need it. Rainy Pass expected to be IFR throughout the day. Windy Pass, marginal weather there. About the same for Isabel Pass as you go through Tuesday. Mentasta Pass looking at VFR, so pretty good weather out to the east. Tanita Pass, we're expecting IFR leaning over toward marginal conditions, and again, maybe a little bit more on the conservative side here. You might sneak away with VFR by the end of the day. Portage Pass does look to be down most of the afternoon and evening, and so does Chilkoot and White Pass. Freezing levels indicate that the surface freezing line is moving further and further north as we go. South of that, you can run into levels aloft anywhere from 2,000, 4,000 to 6,000 feet across the Gulf Coast. You see that line right here, much warmer even to the south. But that 2,000-foot freezing line is lurking at across the eastern chain and the Alaska Peninsula there, and then warmer weather's building in from the west. Icing potential, though, is pretty high up there. Levels running about 6,000 to 8,000 feet across the west coast and into the interior, 7,000 to 8,000 feet across the Alaska Range, and then across the central and southern parts of southeast, way up there, above 10,000 feet for isolated moderate. Again, that's what you see on the map. As far as the jet stream goes, that fast-moving river of air, high pressure sitting across the Gulf, has that main corridor right here across southwestern Alaska, really coming in about 90 to 150 knots. And if you look out west, you can see that omega-shaped building there. That's one of those slower moving waves that we talk about. And on the east side of that is a fairly pronounced trough with wind speeds around it going 150 knots or so. So that's going to keep a lot of activity coming into southwest and south central Alaska, keeping things warm. A northwesterly flow should keep southeast a little bit kind of on the murky side from time to time, but the big cold is being shunted off to the lower 48, where temperatures remain a little bit below normal there. At 9,000 feet, southerlies across the Gulf, you see 50 to 60 knots across the region, onshore flow for southeast, southerlies for the interior, and then a north and easterly flow coming through the Bering. Wind speeds changing direction across the eastern chain there. A much stronger southwesterly flow into Bristol Bay, 50 knots here at 3,000 feet. Southerlies for the interior, a north and easterly flow north of the Brooks Range, 10 to 15. Onshore winds at 3,000 feet, coming in at 20 to 40 knots. Northerlies for the western chain at this point, with low pressure hovering across southwestern Alaska and through the eastern chain through your Tuesday and into Wednesday. Turbulence, you betcha, there's plenty across southwest and the Alaska Range and into the Deltana and Tanana Flats region north of Broad Pass and north of some of the Isabel and Windy Pass regions. And for Prince William Sound and southwest, we expect widespread, considerable moderate there, generally below about 4,000 to 6,000 feet for your Tuesday.
Just as the sun is part of weather on Earth, it also affects weather in space. The sun creates solar wind by steadily releasing a flow of plasma particles in all directions around it. Sometimes the sun gives off a flash of light and X-rays. This is known as a solar flare. When massive bursts of particles explode into space, we call it a coronal mass ejection, or CME. When a CME is directed toward Earth, it hits the magnetosphere, the magnetic field around our planet that protects us. If the storm is large, we may even get to enjoy a light display in the sky called the auroras. In space, satellites may be damaged, and astronauts should take cover. On Earth, people do not feel any physical effects. We may lose electricity in some areas, polar flights may be rerouted, and satellite services may be disrupted. While these situations aren't ideal, they are rare and fixable. This is why we will continue to study the sun and its interactions with Earth and the solar system.
Longing for more space, open skies, and exotic travel? Then look up, about 30 to 600 miles straight up, at the ionosphere, Earth's interface to space. Nestled far above the clouds but below outer space, this little understood destination invites you to explore its many features. Experience both the weather from Earth and the weather from space. Marvel at the ballet of radio waves and navigation signals, like GPS, leaping through this particle paradise. Sit back, relax, and take in the aurora, some satellites, and the International Space Station as they sail by. And you'll want your camera handy for one of the region's signature features, bright and colorful air glow. This daily show is made possible by the ionosphere's own swirling charged particles, because that's what the ionosphere is. It's all charged particles. During the day, enjoy the sea of particles, freshly energized by the sun. As the sun sets, this particle party relaxes and the air glow thins. Our quieter nightlife lets you gaze into clearer skies. The ionosphere is in constant motion, an amazing effect of space weather. Don't miss when solar storms rain down. The storm separates the particles even more, making this colorful region delightfully more dense in some places and stunningly sparse in others. And don't forget about storms from Earth below. Your weather from back home also stirs up this one-of-a-kind destination. Experience the unique beauty of every season, as changes in Earth's atmosphere, daily and annually, can create pressure waves, changing the ionosphere's shape and density. Venture to the equator, where our particles are packed in lush and thick. Cruise along a magnetic field line and see how the ionosphere's charged material also interacts with Earth's own magnetic field. Don't miss the superhighway of particles zipping out to space and back down to the planet. This unpredictable parade of charged particles can help you unplug and unwind. This is because the crowd of particles can garble the radio and satellite communications from home. The ionosphere welcomes you to discover more about this little-known region. After all, once you've explored this interface to space, who knows how much farther you'll be able to go.
When a star, bigger and more massive than the Sun, runs out of fuel at the end of its life, its core collapses while the outer layers are blown off in a supernova explosion. What's left behind depends on the star's original mass. A star roughly 10 to 20 times our Sun leaves behind a neutron star. A more massive star becomes a black hole. Unlike black holes, neutron stars are directly observable, usually as pulsars, the lighthouses of the cosmos. Discovered 50 years ago, they are the densest observable objects in the universe. Neutron stars compress up to twice the Sun's mass into a city-sized sphere. Matter is packed so tightly that a teaspoon of neutron star interior would weigh more than 1 billion tons on Earth. Still, the nature of the ultra-dense matter in the cores of neutron stars is unknown. Because neutron stars pack so much mass into such a tiny volume, they produce gravity strong enough to bend the light they emit, distorting their appearance in a way that enables the mass and size of the star to be measured. Scientists cannot reproduce the extreme conditions in and around neutron stars on Earth. They must look into the galaxy to answer decades-old questions about extreme matter and gravity. NASA's Neutron Star Interior Composition Explorer mission, or NISA, will make X-ray observations of neutron stars from its perch on the International Space Station. It will give astronomers more insight into these mysterious objects, helping determine what is under their surface. A multi-purpose mission, NISA includes a technology demonstration called Sextant. It will analyze NISA's observations to validate the use of rapidly rotating neutron stars as navigation beacons for travel in deep space throughout the solar system and beyond.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
And back with a look at your sea ice today, you'll notice a considerable amount of marginal ice coverage across the northwest coast into Kotzebue Sound and through the Bering Strait. We still have some larger areas of high concentration ice sitting right through the Bering Strait, including areas around Little and Big Diomede Island. And across the upper end of the Yukon Valley, or the Kotzebue Sound region, we're still seeing a lot of the high concentration ice stuck in place. Shore-fast ice that's still there, but there certainly are a lot of changes around the Chukchi Coast and starting to see some changes here in the Beaufort region. As always, you can check the very latest sea ice map and the outlook at weather.gov/Anchorage/ice. Here's a look at the forecast now for southeast. A south and east wind will be upon most of southeastern Alaska through your Tuesday, about 20 knots or so. Most areas along the outer coast holding between about 7 and 9 foot seas, looking for about 4 foot seas on the inside. It's going to be breezy. Most areas looking at least a region of small craft advisories, if not just below that threshold. No strong winds really through your region on Wednesday, mostly 10 to 15 knots on the inside, 25 knots as you head into the Lynn Canal. And generally 8 to about 10 foot seas across the outer coast, 15 to 25 knots on the outside with the strongest winds up around Yakutat, Icy Cape, Cape Fairweather, and west toward Prince William Sound on Wednesday. In southeast, into parts of Prince William Sound coming in from the south and east, 25 knots there with a 4 to 7 foot sea. Southeasterlies coming to Resurrection Bay, as well as the Cook Inlet region, 30 to 35 knots, about 10 foot seas expected there. Northeasterlies coming down northern parts of Cook Inlet with a 5 foot sea on a 20 knot wind. That reverses course for Wednesday, a little bit more of an up inlet flow. South and southwesterlies are expected. Light winds inside of Prince William Sound. A 2 foot sea there, 9 foot seas on the outside though, and 8 to 9 foot seas as you head down through the Kenai Fjords region and into the Barren Islands for your Wednesday. For southwest, inside of Bristol Bay, 40 knots, stronger southeast flow developing there tonight and tomorrow. Look for 9 foot seas, 7 foot seas down the coast, and a much stronger southerly wind on the backside of low pressure that's working its way inland now. 35 to 45 knots around Kodiak Island, 12 foot seas in Shelikof Strait, 21 foot seas south of Akiak down toward Perryville. And then on the other side of the front, you'll see seas drop off with a southwesterly wind coming in at 30 knots. 16 foot seas, though, east of Kodiak. The really choppy and blustery weather settles down a little bit on Wednesday. It's still going with a southerly flow around 15 to 20 knots. 3 foot seas, much improved inside of Shelikof Strait for Wednesday. 8 to 9 foot seas down the Alaska Peninsula coastline of the Pacific side. 5 to 6 foot seas for the Bering Sea coast. A 20 knot wind there also coming in from the south. Across the Bering Sea, you'll notice higher seas north of Adak and Atka, but closer to the coast, we're expecting about 4 to 10 foot seas from Nikolsky to Unalaska, 9 to 12 foot seas across the Bering Sea coast there between Kiska and Atka, and west of that, northerly winds continue 20 knots and 7 foot seas. Pacific coast, about 7 to 8 foot seas expected, with that north and westerly wind strongest between Nikolsky and Atka. East of that, Unalaska, Dutch Harbor, you're looking about 10 foot seas, or 10 knot winds with 7 foot seas there on Tuesday. For Wednesday, a general northwesterly shift should be expected for most areas, about 15 to 20 knots or so, but you're still looking at a southwesterly flow that's generally light between Nikolsky and Unalaska on either side. About 6 foot seas expected there. Elsewhere, about 6 to 9 foot seas in most areas, with that northwesterly flow still remaining generally light, so not even small craft advisory material there. Across the west coast, north and easterly winds coming through Norton Sound, again pushing some of that leftover ice around. 25 to 30 knot winds south of St. Lawrence Island to Nunivak Island, and 15 knots with northerlies, 5 foot seas on Tuesday for St. Paul and St. George. Look for a northwesterly shift as we get into your Wednesday. Southerlies for the Kuskokwim Delta region and northerlies north of Nunivak Island. They're all wrapping into low pressure that's working its way up the coast. That's why you're seeing this wind shift take place. Southeasterlies there in Norton Sound, 25 knots with a 5 foot sea should be expected on Wednesday. And for the north slope over the ice, light winds expected 5 to 10 knots at best. Northeasterlies coming off the Chukchi coast, still moving that ice around 20 to 25 knots, but you will see some areas of open water and 4 to 6 foot seas in those regions there. A northerly wind a little bit stronger in the Bering Strait, 30 knots and 8 foot seas on Wednesday, and an offshore wind continues for the Chukchi coast, and over the ice in the Beaufort, 20 to 25 knots continue. Let's take a look at the rest of your weather again tonight. Southerly winds working over the eastern Alaska Range tonight and tomorrow have issued red flag warnings now for those areas. That means higher fire danger for you. But for most areas along the Gulf Coast, rainfall will be expected, generally light from southeast all the way to Prince William Sound and into the southwest, where low pressure is moving ashore at about 987 millibars. On the north and western side of that, the Seward Peninsula, as well as areas for the Pribilofs and west, may still see some areas of rain and snow mixing. We expect poor visibility across the north slope. And for those communities there, you might even see a little bit of snow as we get into Wednesday. Generally speaking, showers and unsettled weather for most of the mainland. Better chance of rain in northern parts of southeast. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather. We'll see you right here again tomorrow.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.